Donald Trump's megalomaniacal narcissism will not allow him to admit that he can lose an election. And since 2020, he has been alleging massive voter fraud, and that's the only reason he could lose. This story about voter fraud in Fulton County, Georgia, broke at the end of 2025, implying that in the 2020 election, there were hundreds of thousands of illegal votes cast.
We just learned that over 300,000 votes in Georgia were illegally certified in the 2020 election.
It was a big news item on Truth Social for Donald Trump and his MAGA followers. I mean, check for yourself, but my research shows that this was an administrative or procedural matter in Fulton County and in no way affected the legality of the votes cast, and several audits had validated and confirmed the results as being proper and correct. Our species is a storytelling one, and MAGA's belief in massive voter fraud has to do with the story they tell themselves. I have identified that story, and I am revealing it in this video. And as all will be revealed, it's the story of MAGA white supremacy. Welcome to Pillar on Politics, and I'm Bob Pillar. In this video, we're going to be looking at Donald Trump's claims of election fraud and his accusations that Democrats cheat and are thieves and have stolen the election from him. And particularly, very importantly, we will be asking, how does MAGA buy into this? How do they believe it? We'll be also looking at real election fraud data as compiled by the Heritage Foundation, one of Trump's great allies. So I think the video will be interesting. I think it'll be presenting some fairly startling viewpoints, and it'd be great if you watch it to the end. I think it'll be worth your while. Thank you for joining me. Following Trump's FBI raid to seize 2020 voting records in Fulton County, Georgia, and what will certainly become a most notorious statement, Donald Trump said this in an interview.
These people were brought to our country to vote, and they vote illegally. And amazing that the Republicans aren't tougher on it. The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win.
This double whammy of the raid in Georgia and Fulton County and Trump's interview demanding nationalization of the elections caused the left liberal Democratic media sphere to erupt with red alerts and warnings about Trump's propensity to interfere with the 2026 midterm elections. The Atlantic said that it is a 5-alarm fire, and it is. And the reporting is becoming oh so ominous, talking about how Democratic election officials are preparing for potential Trump interference in the midterms. This article is particularly worrisome, where Democratic attorney generals are gaming scenarios in order to thwart Trump's election interference. And they're expecting actions such as confiscating ballots and voting machines. Well, we saw that Trump is willing to do that in Fulton County, so yes, they might do it in 2026. They want to undermine mail-in ballots and perhaps intimidate voters at polling stations with immigration agents and even perhaps the military. These Democratic attorney generals are readying motions for temporary restraining orders in order to preserve election materials and remove armed forces from voting sites. And this report saying that Trump is seeking power over elections. He certainly is. And he's urged by his allies and supporters to declare an emergency, and that there is a draft executive order that would unlock extraordinary presidential power over voting. But first, let's ask ourselves, what is this phenomenon that is the Trump MAGA Republican Party that has been dominating American politics for a decade and has won 2 presidential elections and now dominates the executive branch, the legislative branch, and arguably the judiciary branch? The phenomenon is this. The Trump MAGA Republican Party is the confluence of two raging tributaries. The first is white Christian nationalism combined with white supremacy, and yes, the two are highly, highly, highly correlated. Just read American history and just read about the South. This segment of the American political arena is best represented by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. The second tributary, raging tributary, is Donald Trump himself. He's a visceral anti-black racist and a megalomaniacal narcissist who wants dictatorial power and is willing to use it in service to MAGA, who is willing to give him that dictatorial power. And the two flow together into the Trump-MAGA Republican Party, with Trump as white supremacist in chief. And together, they fly their flags. Trump's election fraud allegations were believed by legions of his supporters. The allegations building up into a rebel yell of election denial and to stop the steal. No, it wasn't this rebel yell. It's this rebel yell. From the Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson, writing in 2020, this remains for me the best one sentence ever written about Donald Trump, summing him up. What Donald Trump really wants to be is to be the president of the Confederacy. After the 2020 election, Trump and his allies amassed an astounding and executed an astounding array of strategies to undermine the election and to take the country for Trump and MAGA. There was the personal pressure on state Republican election officials to find enough votes to win or to negate enough of the other side's vote to win that state. Personal pressure on state legislators, such as in Michigan, to overturn in the state legislature the results of the election. Trump and cohorts filed 61 or 62 lawsuits challenging election results and balloting procedures. They lost every single one of them. Every one of them was thrown out of court for lack of evidence. There was the rather brazen fake elector scheme to nominate separate slates of electors who the states could then insert in substitution of the real winners, the real electors, and these fake electors would, of course, vote for Trump, and many of them were indicted. This was fraudulent. This was illegal. There was the idea that the vice president, when counting the votes, who basically has an administrative, a procedural role to count the votes on January 6th, that he has the power to reject ballots, and that therefore he could send the vote back to the states or into Congress. When all the strategies failed, Trump's final gambit was to order his mob to advance on the Capitol, storm the Capitol, and take it over with the hope of reversing the election result, marching under the flag of election denial.
This is insanity! City, man! It goes all the way down.
What Trump showed us in 2020 and on January 6, 2021, is that he and his cohorts of supporters will do anything to win the election. Their array of strategies was unthinkable before it happened. And we must keep this in mind. Trump will do anything to win, including using political violence. How do Trump's MAGA supporters, 2/3, 70% of them at least, believe Trump's allegations of election fraud? And interesting, no claims of fraud in 2024, even though you would think the Democrats would have tried twice as hard, given their situation with Joe Biden having to drop out and Kamala Harris taking up the torch well into the campaign, and only famously having 107 days to campaign. And don't you think the Democrats would have used a lot of election fraud that should be investigated? But apparently it's only 2020. Before I go into the how and why, let us look at the actual data of election fraud. And we will get the data from, of all places, the Heritage Foundation, Trump's great ally and great believer in Trump, the organization that produced and authored Project 2025, which is Trump's guideline and blueprint for his second term, which he has been implementing pretty much right straight through. The Heritage Foundation election fraud map shows proven instances of election fraud. And the intention is to demonstrate the vulnerabilities in the election process and the ways in which fraud is committed. Their database covers every election from the midterms in 1982 to 2024 presidential election, so federal elections. It has unearthed a total of 1,620 proven cases of election fraud. The Heritage Foundation wants you to think that these 1,620 cases over 40 years somehow indicate that there is significant rot in the American electoral system. I'm going to focus on the last 10 presidential elections, going from the top left, 2024, and in a clockwise manner down to 1988 between George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis. In these 10 presidential elections, there were a total of 1,231,000,000 votes. And in this 1.23 billion votes, there have been 324 cases of proven voting fraud. Let me repeat that. 324 cases of proven fraud. That is 0.00003%. But such a number perhaps isn't really readily understandable. Let me try to illustrate it this way. Let's see how long it takes to count all of the fraudulent vote cases in the last 10 presidential elections. That is, I have to see how long it takes to count up to 324. 1, 2, 3, 4, 322, 323, 324. Done. That took, let's call it 4 minutes, 10 seconds. Even if we could count at the same rate as we did up to 324, it would take 30 years, 1 month and 13 days to count up to 1,231,000,000. But I can't count at the same rate. And for an obvious reason, let me just demonstrate it quickly here. 324. That took just about 2 seconds. 1,230,999. That took over 6 seconds, 3 times as long as to say 324, which means we cannot count at the same rate or pace, which means it'll take, twice as long? 3 times as long? 60 years without sleeping, without eating, without walking the dog, without changing the kids' nappies, without anything, just straight through counting. 60 years, at least, a lifetime, definitely a lifetime, doing nothing but that. And I can count the number of fraudulent vote cases in the last 10 presidential elections in under 5 minutes. Let's focus in on the 2020 election, the election that Donald Trump says was stolen from him. There were 158 million votes, of which they found 31 proven cases of voter fraud, 31 out of 158 million. I don't think I have to go through the counting exercise again to show that this is absolutely awfully ridiculous. What does this say? Very obvious what it says, right? American elections are clean, 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 and yet even more clean. And yet, Donald Trump is continuing an unrelenting drumbeat of election fraud allegations against the Democrats. Thank you.
Do you remember what it was like when the 2020 election was rigged and stolen? Do you remember all the bullshit stories people told you about how the fraudulent election would be overturned? Do you remember the symbols of tyranny when fences went up around D.C. for Joe Biden's inauguration?
On Christmas Day, I guess he didn't get enough presents to open, because on Christmas Day, he posted 25 times about election fraud, 12 of those involving Fulton County. On Christmas Day and through January 2026, Donald Trump posted 121 Truth Social posts on election fraud. Thank you. Trump and his cohorts claim hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes, millions of fraudulent votes. Look at the polling over the last several years since the 2020 election. You will realize that at least two-thirds to 70% of MAGA believe in election denial and the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. In a complete absence of massive voter fraud, I mean an absolute vacuum, how is it the entire political movement, that is MAGA, can convince themselves that there is massive voter fraud? Our species is a storytelling one, and MAGA's belief in massive voter fraud has to do with the story they tell themselves. I have identified that story, and I am revealing it in this video. This is the America MAGA wants, and this is the America as it is today. U.S. Census Bureau data from the 2020 census shows that Americans of white European descent are now less than 60% of the American population, coming in at 58%. And this is the America of the future they fear and hate. And it's coming to you in 2042, or perhaps earlier, given immigration, which explains why they hate immigration. This future prospect of America is driving MAGA apoplectic. It is only 16 years from now. This is why they are going crazy about immigration and voting control. And this is ultimately what is behind Donald Trump's drumbeat of electoral fraud allegations. It is a gambit by Donald Trump and MAGA to take over and to control the elections of America in order to ensure that MAGA always has a dominant plurality. Here's Donald Trump addressing Turning Point during the 2024 presidential election.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
As I've been saying, and I've been saying all along, Trump has the brazen and shameless personality that it takes to make these claims of election fraud and massive cheating by the Democrats. And this personality is formed by his personality disorders of megalomaniacal narcissism and a lack of empathy that puts him in the center of everything. But this is what exactly MAGA wants, and this is what they talk about, that Trump was God sent in order to do this for them, and hence they love him and love him and love him. And to be honest, he's doing a pretty damn good job. On January 6, 2021, in his famous speech on the ellipse, he was already talking about election fraud and cheating in Fulton County. Trump's accusations of massive voter fraud in Fulton County gives us the perfect lens through which we can look and through which we can see and understand the story that MAGA is telling itself and how they can believe that there is such massive voter fraud.
We've been trying to get verifications of signatures in Fulton County. They won't let us do it. The only reason they won't is because we'll find things in the hundreds of thousands. Why wouldn't they let us verify signatures in Fulton County, which is known for being very corrupt? They won't do it. They go to some other county where you would live. I said, that's not the problem.
And who are the people whom Trump is addressing who are not the problem? You be the judge.
Not the problem. The problem is Fulton County, home of Stacey Abrams. She did a good job. I congratulate her, but it was done in such a way that we can't let this stuff happen. We won't have a country if it happens.
Who are the people to whom he is referring to who live in Fulton County? U.S. Census Bureau data shows that Fulton County is comprised of more than 40% blacks. The message is this: the blacks cheated. The blacks stole the election from Donald Trump and MAGA. Not just in Fulton County, Georgia, but in Detroit, Michigan, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The blacks stole the election. The blacks stole the election. The blacks stole the election. Now, how is it that MAGA can so easily and readily accept such an assertion as absolute truth? Well, for this, we have to go into American history, and we have to understand the South. We have to understand the Confederacy. Yes, indeed. MAGA are the spiritual descendants of the Confederate States of America, and foundational to the South, to their Confederacy, of course, was slavery and the justification of slavery biblically, religiously, through the belief in an extended and twisted curse of Ham. To refamiliarize ourselves with the curse of Ham, it appears in Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 to 25. Ham, the son of Noah, saw his father naked, which is a terrible sin in the Bible. Now, Ham was already blessed, so in fact the curse from Noah fell on Ham's son Canaan. It should really be called the curse of Canaan. The curse was that Canaan would be a servant for the rest of his life to his uncles and to his uncles' servants, in what I call the extended and twisted curse of Ham. Somehow over the centuries, maybe even the millennia, the curse of Ham was interpreted as being part of the curse was the darkening of the skin, and that curse was transmitted down the generations through black people. This was the justification. Yes, American slavery was biblically justified by the Southern denominations, in particular the Southern Baptist Convention, which formed in 1845 with the express purpose of defending slavery. If you read through this, you will note that nowhere does it mention the skin color being changed as part of the curse. And it was Canaan who was going to serve his uncles and his uncles' servants. There is no mention of the transmission of the curse down the generations. Yet it somehow became biblical truth that Ham was the forefather of all sub-Saharan black Africans. And the most virulent, hateful, horrific corollary of the extended and twisted biblical curse of Ham is that it holds that blacks by nature are satanic and criminal. Therefore, it is absolutely correct to say that the curse of Ham, the extended and twisted curse of Ham, is the most important biblical story in American history and the most vicious and the most destructive biblical story in American history, and fallacious biblical story. It's basically a heresy. The vast majority of Democrats are still working under the illusion that in America you can describe the political parties as red party, blue party. It's not red party, blue party. That's not the way MAGA sees it. As a matter of fact, MAGA doesn't even see it as white party, black party, because 85-90% of blacks vote in the Democratic Party. How MAGA really sees themselves is they are the white religiously righteous party, and they believe that blacks are born satanic and criminal. If you listen, if you know what to listen for, you can hear the strong echoes, very strong echoes and reverberations of the curse of Ham, the extended and twisted curse of Ham, in the discourse of Donald Trump with his MAGA supporters. When Trump says things like this, which he does often, listen for it, and you will hear it. Once you know about the curse of Ham, you will hear it. Okay?
Or criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it.
This is the extended and twisted curse of Ham talk. This is how they see the Democratic Party, the party of hate, evil, and Satan. This, a message from Donald Trump to his MAGA supporters, is curse of Ham talk. That's how they see politics in America. And that is what Democrats have yet to learn, what they're up against and how the game is being played, and why MAGA is trying so hard to destroy the Democratic Party. Yes, MAGA is still fighting the Civil War, and therefore they're forcing us to continue to fight it too. There it is. It's a belief brought on by the extended and twisted curse of Ham. A story that has been embedded in Southern thought and belief for more than 200 years. It's still with us today. You just have to listen for it. Yet, no one in the left liberal democratic media sphere I don't think they even realize it. They haven't seen this yet. Oh, and by the way, just as an aside, doesn't history suggest it ends this way?
Double canister. That's it, Cushy. Double canister.
So there you have it. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll find this provocative and informative and compelling. And until the next video, this is Bob Pillar with Pillar on Politics. So take care. And one last thought.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed his faithful lightning up his terrible whistle. His truth is marching on. Everybody sing with me. Glory, glory, hallelujah.